Hello everyone and everything, and if you're anything like me, the Speedrun 1 and Speedrun 2 achievements in Hollow Knight are the most imposing achievements in the game, even more so than 100% the game's permadeath mode, or beat every single boss in a row, because no matter how difficult a challenge is, they can all be taken down with sheer persistence. But when I hear speedrunning, I think about precision, and planning, and frame-perfect time saves, and glitches that exploit the game's code. Like, what the heck was even that? What did you just... how? Luckily, I'm here to tell you that attaining Hollow Knight's Speedrun 2 achievement and, by extension, Speedrun 1 is no big deal. You just need a solid understanding of the game's critical progression path, and you're gonna get one, assuming you're still here in 3 minutes. To be clear, this is not a guide on how to pursue world record competitive speedrun times in Hollow Knight. At time of writing, the current record without major glitches stands at just under 32 minutes, and I am not here to teach you how in the Pale King's name you're meant to pull off this sort of thing. But rather, this is meant to be a highly beginner-friendly guide on how to beat the game in under 5 hours. So, let's dive on in. Beating the game means seeing any of the game's endings on either Classic or Steel Soul mode, and rolling credits. The simplest ending to get is the Hollow Knight ending, gotten by beating the Hollow Knight in the Temple of the Black Egg. In order to enter the Temple of the Black Egg, you need to vanquish all 3 Dreamers, each located in some of the toughest to reach places in the game, and you'll need the Dream Nail in order to deal with them. Now, here's where Hollow Knight's approach to non-linearity makes things messy. Each Dreamer can be reached via multiple different routes, and each of those may require different upgrades than the others, all of which can be gotten in just about whatever order you please. And some might only be required in quotation marks. The Watcher, for instance, is found at the top of the City of Tears, and requires the Monarch Wings to reach. Getting the Monarch Wings from the Broken Vessel in the Ancient Basin requires the Crystal Dash from the Crystal Peaks, and getting the Crystal Dash requires either the Desolate Dive from the Soul Master in the Soul Sanctum, or the Lumafly Lantern sold at an extremely high price by Sly and Dirtmouth, who you'll first have to rescue from the bottom of the Forgotten Crossroads. And to reach the Watcher's Spire, you'll need access to the right half of the City of Tears. If you got the Desolate Dive, you can reach it from above, via the Resting Grounds. If you got the Tram Pass, you can reach it from below, via this tram at the bottom of Deep Nest. Or you can find a simple key, like this one here in the city storerooms, and use that to make your way through to the Royal Waterways. If you take that route, you will need to either defeat the Dung Defender, or you'll need the Crystal Dash. Choosing which of these progression paths you want to take isn't a decision best made in a vacuum. You need to consider what the other Dreamers require so you can overlap critical points and upgrades. So, heading to the far reaches of Deep Nest and the Beast will essentially require the Lumafly Lantern, or you could make your way in from above via the Queen's Gardens. Reaching the Gardens will require either Isma's Tear or the Shade Cloak, and even though the Queen's Gardens themselves don't contain anything we need on our critical path, the detour is worth considering, because reaching the Teacher in the center of the Fog Canyon also requires either Isma's Tear or the Shade Cloak, and if you don't have Isma's Tear, you'll need the Crystal Dash to traverse the Teacher's archives. To get Isma's Tear and so be able to swim through Acid, you'll need to defeat the Dung Defender and flip this switch, unlocking this route, which you'll also need the Crystal Dash to traverse. Even that is far preferable to the alternative of getting the Shade Cloak, for which you'd first need the Monarch Wings, then to go to the Kingdom's Edge, another area which we would otherwise be able to skip entirely, double jump up here, have a tough fight against Hornet to earn the King's Brand, use that to access the Abyss, and eventually gain the Shade Cloak down in its depths. Let's also talk about how to get the Dream Nail, which will be necessary no matter which route you take. You'll obtain it when you reach the Resting Grounds, and for that, you can come up from the City of Tears, use the Monarch Wings here in the Forgotten Crossroads, use the Tram Pass here in the Forgotten Crossroads, or drop down from the Crystal Peak, using either the Desolate Dive route or the Lumafly Lantern route. Okay, so, yikes. That's a whole lot of branches and loops and converging paths and what have you. Ultimately, the route you choose through all of this is largely going to be up to you. No matter what route you choose though, your run will always start the same way. At least, it will if you don't know how to do this. So, after going through the tutorial area in King's Pass, you'll enter the Forgotten Crossroads, make your way around into the center to face the False Knight, and so earn the Vengeful Spirit spell from the Snail Shaman. Afterwards, you'll use that spell to defeat the Balder guarding the route to the Green Path, fight Hornet at the end of it to earn the Mothwing Cloak, and then use that to make your way down to the Fungal Wastes, where you can pick up the Mantis Claw in the Mantis Village, granting you access to the spider web that is the rest of the progression path. Mind you, that's all not to mention any optional upgrades, like charms, additional health, and increases to your damage. If nothing else, you should definitely find time to pay for the Sharpened Nail upgrade in the far left of the City of Tears, but there are very few Mask Shards or Pale Ores that I would consider to be simple detours. Time permitting, this Mask Shard at the far left end of the Royal Waterways, this one in the lower area of the Forgotten Crossroads, which requires the Mantis Claw, and this one in the Queen Station, also needing the Mantis Claw, are all pretty easy. Sly sells 2 more easy ones up in Dirtmouth, one for 150, then 500 Geo. Those shouldn't be too much of a problem to afford. You can also consider claiming one from beating Moloch past this hidden route at the bottom left of the Forgotten Crossroads, or you can rescue at least 5 grubs from their glass jars and claim a shard from the Grub Father. You could also consider buying even more from Sly, but you'd need the shop key from up here in the Crystal Peaks, and to be ready to pay quite a bit of money. Now, before we delve in earnest, let's touch on sequence breaks. Even if I spent the rest of this video's runtime just explaining every sequence break that's possible, I still wouldn't have covered them all. So, as they become relevant, I'm going to mention only the ones that I consider to be the most useful while still being approachable to the more casual player. But just know that there are many, many, many others that can be done, and probably yet more that haven't even been discovered. So, I'm going to take you through one possible route. Of course, there are like 1,012 possible routes that you could take, but this one is my personal favorite for a number of reasons. It's by no means the fastest, but I think it strikes a good balance of efficiency and beginner friendliness. And through a couple of simple sequence breaks, we'll end up entirely skipping the Soul Sanctum, and by extension one of this game's tougher battles, as well as completely bypassing my least favorite area, the Royal Waterways. For starters, it can be tempting to begin your run on Steel Soul mode, the logic being that if you die, you may as well start over due to the time loss. And this way, you can also pursue the Steel Soul achievements as well. But for your own sake, don't. The time you'll lose if you die really isn't significant enough to threaten your 5-hour time limit. And we may actually want to take advantage of some of the things that can only be done in Classic mode. On top of that, Steel Soul mode is best tackled by being as slow, methodical, and upgraded as you can be, which is not going to be the case today. I also want to draw attention to the game's third game mode, Godseeker, which can be unlocked by beating one of the Pantheons in Godhome in another file. In Godseeker mode, you'll have access to practicable versions of nearly every boss fight in the game, so if there's any fight that you reach in your speedrun file that you don't feel suitably prepared for, you can always switch files and practice against them in Godhome. Remembering, of course, that your speedrun doesn't need to be done all at once, as it's only measuring time spent in-game, not real time. So, go ahead and start up on Classic. Right off the bat, we're going to break this hidden Geo Rock to the left of the start. For this route, I plan on spending a pretty good deal of money, about 4,000 Geo total, so I'll be going slightly out of my way from time to time to gather Geo from large concentrations of it. Many speedruns will go ahead and grab Fury of the Fallen from this secret path here, as the increase in damage can help save a lot of time on boss fights. But for those of us who aren't confident in getting through literally most of the game without getting hit, it's probably too situational to warrant going out of your way for here. So I'll personally be skipping past this one. As we get into the Forgotten Crossroads, we're not going to waste any time and head straight for Cornifer. On the subject of the map maker, I recommend having an online map of Hallownest pulled up and at the ready as you speedrun. That way you can completely skip past Cornifer and more easily plan your route ahead. If you really want to buy the map anyway, you might as well. He's right here and it's Dirtmouth cheap. One thing I definitely want to bring across here is that there's really no pressure. I'm going to be showing you a pretty optimized route, and generously, it shouldn't take much more than 3 hours to get through. So you have a lot of leeway to play the game your own way, pursue your own interests, or even make mistakes. As you come up on the lower right of the crossroads, now would be a good time to get into the habit of bench warping. This is an extremely powerful time-saving tool that's effortless to pull off. We're going to go up to the Stag Station and sit on the bench before we head down to this lower village area and fight the Grubsmother. After talking with Sly in this house down below, rather than climb our way back up to where we were, we're going to simply quit to menu, and when we resume our file, we'll already be back where our last bench was. In this case, in the Stag Station. While we're in the neighborhood, just to get some easy money, we're gonna go ahead and rescue this grub behind the secret wall, and open the shortcut back up to the top of the crossroad, and save this grub from behind this husk guard. One more bench warp, and you can unlock this Stag Station if you want, but it's not entirely necessary. Now, let's head into the fight with the False Knight. You should definitely note that it's possible to dip out of this fight entirely and move on to unlock the Vengeful Spirit by attacking this wall after the big guy does his first Tantrum Slam attack, and dislodges these wooden beams. But if you do this, you miss out on the City Crest, which grants access to the left entrance of the City of Tears, and this big chest of 200 Geo. I don't care about the crest, this route doesn't need it, but I do want the Geo, so we're gonna take him down. After we beat him and earn the Vengeful Spirit from the Snail Shaman, we're gonna briefly put off heading to Greenpath. First, earn a couple more Geo by visiting the Grub Father, then head up into Dirtmouth to spend it. The only thing I want for sure right now is Gathering Swarm. We're gonna want a ton more money yet, and that'll go much faster if we don't have to stop and pick it up every time we take out an enemy or hit a Geo Rock. If you want to pick up the Quill and Wayward Compass from Zelda, that's up to you, but I'm gonna leave her be. Now, getting into Greenpath, Hornet makes her first appearance and makes a big deal out of being on a ledge that you couldn't possibly reach, forcing us to take the long way around if we want to reach her. But we've got a great skip we can pull off here with not much effort. Lure this little squid up here from down below until it's positioned between these two ledges. Then, simply nail pogo off of him and you're on your way. There's not much else to note on the path to Hornet, but we are going to be rescuing this grub guarded by this Moss Knight. If you're worried about the fight with Hornet, feel free to set your respawn point on the bench in the stag station right below, and then head on in. After thrashing her and getting the ability to dash, we're gonna pick up this Wanderer's Journal from right outside the stag station, and then take the stag on back to Dirtmouth. Rather than travel down to the Fungal Wastes via the Fog Canyon and Queen Station, we're gonna head to the bottom left of the Forgotten Crossroads and make this jump here, entering the Fungal Wastes from above. On our way down, we're gonna pay a quick visit to the Leg Eater's shop, paying him to show us his charms, and buying Fragile Strength. I'm going to be giving a lot of priority to upgrading our nail on this run, as it essentially makes every combat challenge much easier and more expedient, and Fragile Strength is definitely a part of that. Of course, it does come with risks, as it breaks and becomes useless if we have it equipped while we die. To avoid breaking it, I recommend further abusing bench warping by simply quitting the game whenever you get down to one mask in a risky situation, rather than having to return to Leg Eater to have it repaired. Now, because I want both Strength and the Gathering Swarm, I'm going to briefly overcharm myself here. This can be done by trying to fill 2 empty notches with the 3-notch Strength charm 5 times, until we manage to just jam it on in there. While overcharmed, we'll be vulnerable and taking double damage, but not to worry. At the bottom of this path to the left is an easy battle with some fungal ogres, and beating them grants us a new charm notch, removing our overcharm status. With the increased damage, it shouldn't be a problem to make your way straight down to the Mantis village. I'll skip ahead a bit and let you know that we're going to be fighting the Mantis lords here, so if you're worried about your performance in that fight, set your bench at this slightly closer one down at the bottom right of the fungal waste. So let's quickly grab the Mantis claw and make our way down to the throne room. Before engaging the fight, you can make it a bit easier on yourself by hopping up this left wall and breaking into the secret lifeblood cocoon, giving yourself a little extra breathing room in the fight to come. I've chosen to fight the lords at this point for 2 reasons. For one, they give us access to their treasure trove up and to the right where we can get a mountain of geo and my personal favorite charm, the Mark of Pride, both of which we'll want for later. For 2, I want to head right on into Deep Nest. Our goal now is to get the tram pass from the failed tramway, and despite how the map looks, the only way there is through this circuitous route past the hot springs at the bottom. Be sure to set your bench point at the hot springs, and don't sit on this bench up at the tramway, because once we've got the tram pass, we're going to want to bench warp straight back to the bottom. After all that, make your way through these Garpede tunnels to the right to the lower tramway, and we will be on our way to the Ancient Basin. The first thing I want to do here is head to the left and fight past all these lesser Molochs and earn yourself a bit of Pale Ore. This is the main reason I've chosen this route through the game. Having the Pale Ore before we go into the City of Tears is extremely convenient. Alright, here's where the best laid plans fall apart a bit. At this point, I wanted to show off a really cool sequence break to get the Monarch Wings before the Crystal Dash, but ended up learning that the skip relies on not being able to kill your Shade with a single Vengeful Spirit. Long story short, the Shade's HP scales with your base damage and total masks. Since both of those are at 5 for us right now, it only has 12 HP, and our Vengeful Spirit does 15 damage. So I'll have to show this skip in detail at a time where it makes a little less sense to do so. But let's not dwell on that, and move on up to the City of Tears. Go ahead and use the bench inside the tram to switch from Fragile Strength to Mark of Pride, as it'll make climbing up to the City of Tears a little easier, especially this jump right here. Real fast before heading into the elevator shaft, there's another pretty convenient Wanderer's Journal we can grab right down here, and then we can make this spiky ascent. Now, once we're at the top, we've reached the city. This is where the advantages of the route we've taken become most apparent. We already have access to the right half of the city without needing to go through the Royal Waterway. This is the best place in the game for getting a lot of geo fast, and we're about to go on a pretty big spending spree. We're going to want about 3,700 geo going forward, so we're going to start from the right and sweep left. First, we're going to set our bench at the King's Station, grabbing the best worst secret Hallownest seal in the game while we're here. Go ahead and switch back to Fragile Strength, then we're going to go to the secret passage from the lower King's Station over to this grub, and then back to the city proper. Now, this area right here is the best grinding spot in the game, filled with great husk sentries that each drop 50 geo upon death. But don't start grinding yet. If you go through this door here and jump through the secret passage at the back of it, you'll find the gorgeous husk, which drops 420 geo, and another door here leads to a grub guarded by a great husk sentry. We're also going to pay a visit to Lem and turn in the few relics we found on our travels. You'll have to take this upper route from the outside, and while you're doing that, you may as well grab this Hallownest seal at the top of the room. Ow. Then we'll make our way over to the nailsmith, buying both the sharpened nail and the channeled nail, nearly tripling our base damage. After buying those upgrades, you should ideally have about 2,800 geo left, so if you're not there, now you can grind the great husk sentries. Once we're stocked up, bench warp back to the King's Station, and travel on back to Dirtmouth. Now we're gonna go ahead and buy the Lumafly Lantern and the 2 mask shards Sly has for sale. Once we've got those, we're gonna pay another visit to the Grubfather and get our reward for rescuing 5 grubs, another mask shard, and then immediately we're gonna head down to this room under the hot spring and get a 4th mask shard, giving us a welcome 6th mask. Now we can head over to the darkened room at the right of the crossroads and use the Lumafly Lantern to operate its toll gate and head through. Our only goal in the Crystal Peaks is to get the Crystal Heart in this room here before heading to the Forgotten Crossroads down this way. It looks straightforward, but the entire right half of the mines is pretty much locked down, and the only way into the Crystal Heart room is to go all the way up to the top and down this way. On our way up, we're going to skip the fight against the Crystal Guardian. He'd give us a fair bit of money, but apart from some stag stations, we don't really need to worry about Geo anymore. So just take the most direct path you can in and out of the mines. If you do need a bench, this one down here works just fine. Once in the resting grounds, we can gain the Dream Nail, at which point we've gained all the upgrades we need in order to face the Dreamers and then beat the game. We can do the 3 in any order, and none of the routes we're going to be taking are going to give us anything too worthwhile, so in no particular order, let's start with the Beast. Take the Stagways to the King's Station and head on down to the Ancient Basin. Here, Deep Nest is a simple tram ride away, but if at this point you want to use your Crystal Dash to get the Monarch Wings, that could be a good idea, as they do make navigating Deep Nest a little bit easier. And now that we're in the area with the improved damage and HP, I can show how to cross the gap without the Crystal Dash. Despite currently having the Crystal Dash and the skip being entirely useless in this sequence, but I still want to show it in case it's a skip you want to incorporate into your routing. First, pay for and sit on this bench in the long spiky room, and switch from Fragile Strength to Mark of Pride. Then, nail pogo your way all the way across this huge chasm of spikes. Without Crystal Dash, you're not really welcome here, evidenced by this overhang at the far end. So, seeing as we're not welcome, let yourself die here at this side of the room. Next, leave the room and gain enough soul to use a Vengeful Spirit. Nail pogo back to the center platform, and perform this tricky maneuver. Wall jump from nearly the top of the wall to give yourself as much height and distance as you can get, then dash and fire your Vengeful Spirit. If done correctly, this should be enough to aggro your Shade who's hovering at the far end. Nail pogo back to where you let yourself die and use your Shade as a nail pogo target to clear the overhang. This is what's called a Shade skip, and through clever, dying, you can use tricks just like it to bypass all sorts of obstacles, mostly those you would otherwise need the double jump for. For instance, if you are planning on getting the Shade Cloak in your route, you can use a Shade Skip in this room here in order to get to Hornet without needing the Monarch Wings. Now, there's nothing stopping us from heading into the battle with the Broken Vessel and gaining the Monarch Wings. And if in your route you're not skipping the Monarch Wings, be aware that you can find a simple key right down here, which can be helpful to have if your chosen route takes you through the Royal Waterways. However, even though I'm already here, I am just going to turn back, because I very specifically don't want to have the Monarch Wings. I want to show off how they're not actually necessary to beat the game, should you want to skip them in your own speedrun. So let's turn around, re-equip our Fragile Strength, and head into Deep Nest. Now, hypothetically, it would be possible to get through this room without the Lumafly Lantern, but they made sure that would be a gut-wrenching experience, with spikes on walls, ceilings, and floors, so we're not going to worry about it. We are not flying blind today. There's not too much more to say about the Beast's route, though if we had the Monarch Wings, it would be possible to skip the fake bench sequence with some clever maneuvering, saving a neat little chunk of time. After trawling in and out of the Beast's den, let's head down to the Teacher. Now, you may have noticed I have neither the Shade Cloak nor Isma's Tear, and so according to the critical upgrade path, I shouldn't be able to get to the Teacher's archives. This is probably the most helpful sequence break that I'm going to show today. First, head down to the lowest leftist part of the Forgotten Crossroads. This spot right here would normally be a shortcut in and out of the Fog Canyon if we had Isma's Tear. But the water level or acid level is low enough that it's not actually too hard to do some actual speedrunner shenanigans. With good timing, you can Mantis Claw grip onto this left ledge and Crystal Dash across, immediately wall jumping off the right ledge and completely bypassing the acid. This may take a couple of tries, but it is honestly way easier than it looks. And, alright, I gotta confess, I completely slipped up and forgot I had the Fragile Strength charm equipped while I was trying this, and I accidentally let it break. If this had happened at any other point in the run, I probably would have just cut my losses and just pressed onward with the Mark of Pride, but we're so close to Leg Eater right now that I took a quick detour to get it repaired. Back to the sequence break. I've had the most luck by dashing into the first wall before crystal dashing. I had to practice the exact timing on this pillar here a couple of times to reliably pull it off. Then I just mashed the jump button after I got into the other chamber, rather than trying to time it just right. But whatever works for you. After that, we're in. That is the only point where Isma's Tear is required on this route. So head right on down to the archives and face off against Umu. The only snag is that after beating Umu, you'll have to remember to go down the right path, as the left is impassable with just the Crystal Dash, unless you also have the Monarch Wings. Finally, the Watcher. The Watcher ostensibly requires the Monarch Wings, but if we equip the Mark of Pride, we can show Old Man Leary here a thing or two. This is the jump in question, and lucky us, they put some breakable objects right here at the base of it. Like the Acid Pool skip, the exact timing and positioning may take a couple of tries, but it's completely doable. And these objects respawn just by exiting and re-entering the room. Use the bench in the Watcher's Spire to switch back to Fragile Strength, and then head on up to the fight against the Watcher Knights. The Watcher Knights are affectionately considered the guardians of the Speedrun 2 achievement. Even in a casual run where you have every upgrade, they're no pushover. And in regards to this sequence, we have no invincibility frames from Shade Cloak or Desolate Dive. Our only spell is an unupgraded Vengeful Spirit, and we don't even have the Monarch Wings, although that last part is really my own fault. Luckily, we do have huge damage with our Nail combined with Fragile Strength. We're actually doing nearly as much as a fully upgraded Nail would do. Combine that with our ability to knock one of the Knights out of the fight before it even starts by using this hidden Chandelier Rope, and we can pretty confidently weather the fight's difficulty as long as we just keep up the damage. Easiest way to do that is to Nail Pogo the heck out of them, only dashing away when you see them winding up a bouncy roll. And that'll essentially be the end of the run. Of course, we're not going for essentially. We're trying to actually get the achievement here, so let's finish this at the Temple of the Black Egg. The fight against the Hollow Knight can be surprisingly difficult when you're not fully outfitted, especially as it can't be properly practiced in Godhome. So, as some quick dirty tricks, bear in mind that his first phase can be pretty effectively cheesed by nail pogoing him constantly. His second phase is his toughest, but it only has 350 health. So if you just wail on him as much as you can, you should be able to follow through to the third and fourth phases, where he gives you tons of opportunities to heal off damage. Take your victory lap, and that's gonna do it. My final time was 2 hours and 20 minutes, and that's including some pretty unnecessary detours, as well as the fact that I was writing this script as I was going, so if you follow along, I have no doubt you'll clear that 5-hour limit no problem. So that's gonna do it for this video. If you're looking for an in-depth guide on how to get every single other achievement, check out the playlist on screen, and I will see you there. Thanks for watching.